Hi guys, my name is Atisha and today in this video we are going to learn how to build an AI chat app using the Gemini APIs provided by Google. The app that we are going to build is basically going to take the input from the user like this and going to get us the response using the Gemini Pro model. So the app that you are seeing on the screen right now is only able to generate the response based on the user prompt. Neither it is able to save the chat history nor is able to take the image as an input. But in our upcoming videos, we'll also build those AI chat apps as well. And the project source code of this particular video is given in the description box down below. You can download from there. So without any further delay, let's get started. So I've already set up a new Xcode project and I've named it Chat with Gemini. Now before actually using the Gemini APIs, there are 4 crucial steps that one need to follow. The first one is to set up the API key. The second one is to add those API keys into our Xcode project. The third one is to add the SDK package, and fourth one is to finally initialize the model. Once we are done with all of these 4 steps, we would be good to go to create our UI and use the model to generate the response. Now let's take a closer look at each one of these steps and how to do them. Now the first step is to set up the API key. So in order to use the Gemini APIs, we need an API key. So what is an API key? It is basically a unique identifier that is used to perform the API calls. Since the Google Gemini APIs are not open, so in order to use them, we first need to register ourselves on their platform and we need to obtain the secret code or the access key, which is called the API key, so that we can become an authenticated user and make use of their APIs into our Xcode project. So why do we need those API keys? It's basically because Google want to ensure that whoever is using their API is an authorized user, and also with the help of this, they manage and monitor the usage of their services so that when we use their APIs in our actual project, they can bill us accordingly. So let's see how we can get those API keys. So you first need to log into Google AI Studio, the link of which I'll give in the description. And once you have logged in, you'll be taken to this particular page. So here you can click on this create API key, and here you get 2 options. If you have an existing Google Cloud project, you can generate your API keys there. But if you don't have that, you can create API key in a new project. Once you click this, your API key will get generated. So once this API key is generated, you can simply copy it and add it to your Xcode project. How? We will see later. But before that, there is an important point to note in here. Since every API key uniquely identifies a user, it's really very important that you do not share this API key with anyone. Because if anyone gets access to your API key, they can make calls on your behalf and you might get billed for it. So let's copy this one for now. And now let's see how we can add it to our Xcode project. So in order to securely add the API key to our Xcode project, there are several different ways to do it. But we are going to use one of the most popular ways, that is to add the API key to a .plist file, that is property list file. So for that, what we are going to do is we are going to create a property list file in the root of our project folder, and then we are going to create the API key, and corresponding to it, the value is going to be the API key that we have just copied. So let's quickly create new file over here, and we'll search for property list file. This is the file that we are going to create, and let's name it generative AI-info and click on create. Now once this is created, what we are going to do is click on this plus and let's name it API key. You can name it whatever you want over here, but it's always a good idea to give a generalized name. And corresponding to it here, the value is going to be the API key that you have just copied. Now this is done. So up to this step, we have just stored the API key, but we also need to find a way to fetch this particular API key from this .plist file. Now for fetching the API key, let's create a new file again. So let's create a Swift file over here and I will call it API key for now. Now within it, what we are going to do is to create an enum. Let's call it API key, and inside it we have written this code. Let me quickly explain you what this code is doing. So basically inside our enum, we are creating a computed property called as default. Why it is called computed? Because it is not actually storing the value, but computing a particular value. And then we are trying to find the path of the file with the name generative AI info, which is of type plist from the bundle container directory. If you have named your file something else, make sure to change it over here. If you are unable to find the file, we are returning an error saying that we couldn't find the file generative AI info.plist. But if we are able to find out the path of the file, we are trying to read out the content of the file using a dictionary and then trying to find out the value that is associated with the key named as API key. Again, if you have named your variable as something else, then you have to change it over here as well. And we are checking whether it's a string or not. According to the norms of the API keys generally do not start with an underscore. So we are also writing a condition over here that if the value starts with an underscore, that means that it is not an API key and we are returning an error. But if everything goes fine, then we are returning the actual value, that is the value of the API key, now that we can use in our SwiftUI file. Now let's move on to the next step, that is to add the Google AI SDK to our Xcode project. Google AI SDK is available in iOS as a Swift package, which is named as Google Generative AI, which we can add to our Xcode project, which will simplify the overall integration process. Let's see how we can add that. So we'll right click on our project folder and we'll click on add package dependency. And here we'll search for this particular one. I'll drop this URL in the description box down below and click on add package. Once it is added, we would be able to use or import the Google Generative AI package in our project folder. So let's click on add package. So now you can see that in your left in our package dependency, Generative AI Swift is listed. Now let's move on to the next step, that is to initialize the model. So for initializing the model, let's first import the Google Generative AI module at the top, and after that, let's create an instance of the generative model class and assign it to a variable, and let's call it model. So we will write generative model, and here we need to pass in two things: the name of the model that we want to use and our API key for authorization. Gemini is basically an umbrella term used for the family of generative AI models that are there. So according to our specific need, we need to specify which model name we want to use. Since we are only passing a text and we want a response in text only, so for here we will use the Gemini Pro model. And for passing the API key, we are going to use the file that we had just created, API key, and use this variable called as default. So up to this point, we are done initializing our model. Now is the time to build the UI. So the idea here is to make a very basic UI and focus more on the functionality. You can modify the UI as per your requirements and make it more visually appealing. So firstly, we would require 3 state variables, one for managing the user input, second for managing the response from the AI model, and third for managing the time that the model takes to generate the response. So for that, let's create 3 state variables. Let's call the first one as user prompt. And since when the app starts, there is no input from the user, we'll set it to an empty string. Let's call the second one as response. We can initialize it with a simple string. Say, how can I help you today? And let's call the third one as is loading. And since there is no input to generate the response, so this will be set to false. Let me quickly remove this from here. So the first thing we require is a title. So let's create a title over here and let's name it Welcome to Gemini AI. And let's style it a bit. Let's give it a font of large title and also make it a bit bold. So we'll give a font weight to it. Let's also give it a foreground style and give it a color of indigo. Also some padding from the top. So we'll use this top and give a padding from the top as 40. Now after this, we want to show the response that we have received from the AI model. Now that response might exceed this space that we have on the screen. So we'll use a scroll view over here. So within a Z stack, we are going to have a scroll view first. And within this scroll view, we are going to show the response that we have received from the AI model. And let's give it a font of title. Now, till the point the user hasn't given any input, this response is going to be this string, how can I help you today? But as and when we have received the response, then this would change. And we also want to take care that as and when the model is taking the time to load the response, during that time, instead of this text, we should show a loader. So for that purpose, we are going to give a condition over here. If is loading variable is set to true, then in that case we want to show a progress view. This is a view that is provided by SwiftUI, so we don't have to generate anything. We can simply write progress view, and you can give it the style you want. So let's give it a style of circular progress view style with some tint, and the tint color, let's give it indigo. So let's see how it is looking like. So let me set it to true and see what happens. So yeah, we can see a loader over here, but you can see it's very small. So let's increase its size a bit. So let's give it a scale effect and give it a size of 4. Okay, this looks good. Now after this, we simply need a text field so that can capture the user input. So after this stack, let me reset it to false. Let's create a text field, and let's also give it a default value of, say, ask anything. Now the input that the user provide, we need to store it in this variable called as user prompt. So we are going to use it here, and we'll give the axis as vertical. Why we are giving this axis is, as and when the user type, this text field should increase its size vertically, and we can also set the line limit as well. So let's set the line limit as 5. If the number of line exceeds 5, then it automatically gets into a scroll view. And let's also give some styling to this. So we'll give it a font of title. Let's also give some padding to it, and we'll give it a background. So in the background, let's give it a color with some opacity. So let's give it a color of indigo, and we'll set the opacity to 0.2 so that the text that we are writing has good visibility. And let's also put it in a shape of capsule. And we also do not want to have auto correction, so let's disable that. So disable auto correction and set it to true. Okay. Now we can see over here that we have a text field which looks good, and we can write it over here. Now the last thing that is left is to have a on submit handler. So let's write on submit. So when the user hits enter, we want to submit this so that the generative AI model could process this particular prompt that the user has given and generate the response accordingly. So for that, let's create a function and let's call it generate response. Okay, now it's time to define this particular function. So outside this view, let's define this one. Let's write function generate response. Now within this generate response function, the first thing that we are going to do is to set the isLoading variable as true. And as soon as we have received the response, we'll set it to false. Second, we'll set the response from the AI as an empty string, because on the screen we do not want to show anything up to the point the response is loaded, and during that time we'll only show the loader. Now we'll perform an asynchronous task. So we'll write a do catch over here. Now within this, we want to use a function that is provided by this class called generative model that is able to generate the content from the user prompt. So if we go within this generative model and see how it is being defined, then you would be able to see that there is a function within it called as generate content, which basically generates the content from the user input. So we are going to use this one. So let's assign it to a variable and let's call it result, and we are going to use try await. From this model instance that we have created, we are going to use this generate content, and here we need to pass in the user input. So we will write user prompt over here, and as soon as we have received the result, we will set this isLoading variable to false again. Now we also want to set our response based on the result that we have received. So we know that this response is of type generate content response, and it's nothing but a struct, and within this we have a property called as text, which basically gives the response content as text. So here we will write result dot text, and if it does not exist, we will write no response found, and after that we will set our user prompt again to an empty string. And in case there are any errors, so we'll capture that as well within the response. So we'll write something went wrong, and we also want to print out the error, so we'll write error.localized description. Okay, so we are done doing this. Let's run this on the simulator and see if our AI chat app is working fine or not. Okay, so this looks as expected. Let's try to give it a prompt. Let's ask it a SwiftUI question. What are property wrappers in SwiftUI? Okay, so we have got the response that property wrappers are a powerful mechanism, and it has also given us some key features. Also, apart from that, it has given us some commonly used property wrappers as well. But here you can see that it has given the response in a markdown format. So if you want to change this to a normal string, so what you can do over here is you can assign it a type of localized string key, and also wrap this particular result that we have received in localized string key again. So once we have done that, we should be able to see the changes in the response. We'll again ask the same question. Let's ask it, what are property wrappers in SwiftUI? Okay, now we can see that whatever is there has been converted to bold or italic, and also to a code format. Okay, so that's majorly it about this video. You have seen that how easily we have built an AI chat app which uses the Gemini APIs, and you have also learned how we can integrate them into our SwiftUI app. So now it's time for you to play around with it and build more complex applications with it. So that's it about this video. If you like this video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe to this channel for more such videos in future.